Hello, thank you for joining us today with a chat with the scientists and engineers on board research vessel Falkor. My name is Logan Mock-Bunning, and I'm on the communications team for Schmidt Ocean Institute. We're excited to have an audience from North America joining us as we talk about science and working on research vessel Falkor during an expedition. Before we get started today, a little bit of housekeeping. We love participation from all of you watching, so please ask questions. You can ask questions on the YouTube chat bar on the right of your screen, or send tweets with the handle Schmidt Ocean or hashtag MicrobeEDDIES. Please go ahead and post questions now or at any point in the Hangout. We'll be answering questions during a few spots during the Hangout and have a set time at the end for additional Q&A. To get things rolling, a bit of background. The Schmidt Ocean Institute was established in 2009 and strives to advance the frontiers of ocean research and exploration through technological innovation, operational support, and open sharing of information. Now I'd like to pass it over to those on the ship for introductions and background on the cruise.
All right, thanks, Logan. My name is Alicia Wood-Carlson. I'm at the University of Hawaii on board the Falkor with a bunch of scientists with me, scientists and engineers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Brett Hobson, the mechanical engineer, and my colleagues.
Hi, my name is Chris Preston, and I am a microbiologist.
I'm Brent Roman, and I'm a software engineer.
And I'm Roman Marin, and I am a senior research technician.
So I thought we'd start off real quick with a quick introduction to what this cruise is about, and I've got a slide deck that Logan's going to share with everybody. I'm going to do this relatively quickly because we want to leave most of the time for questions and answers with mate schools that we're calling in with in Watsonville, California. So just to give you kind of a short rundown on this particular cruise on the Falkor does lots of different types of cruises. This particular cruise is focused on eddies, characterizing eddies and exploring their ecosystems. And we have some brand new robots that we're trying out in the open ocean to help us with this kind of science. And when that slideshow comes up here in a second, I can give you a few more details. This cruise will be at sea. This is our second week. We will be out here for an entire month. We have a website, a cruise website on the Schmidt Ocean Institute, where we're putting up blogs and weekly video summaries as well. So I encourage everyone to go check that out through the rest of the call. So this is the title of our cruise, Eddy Exploration and Ecosystem Dynamics. Again, with the Schmidt Ocean Institute on the Falkor. The two main organizations involved in this cruise are the Simon's Collaboration on Ocean Processes and Ecology, otherwise known as SCOPE, and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, also known as MBARI.
We're having a hard time hearing. I'm wondering if she can face the microphone.
I'll move the microphone over here while I'm talking.
There, that's way better.
Okay. Next slide, Logan. So ocean eddies are basically circular currents that occur in the oceans around the world. This is a little diagram or a little picture of an experiment we did on board that you can find the video online. But basically, there's circular currents that occur in the ocean, and those circular currents actually trap and isolate water inside those currents as they spin. Next slide. We're exploring this particular eddy just north of Maui for about a month. And you can see this is us setting off from shore from Honolulu about a week and a half ago. So that's where we're going to be for the month. And we're interested in eddies because the water trapped inside creates this really unique ecosystem that moves water, moves nutrients up and down, acts as a carbon sink. It hosts distinct microbial communities, and it transfers heat around the Earth. Next slide. We're really interested in this particular component, the microbes, for this particular cruise, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next one. Thanks, Logan. Ocean microbes are important. These are just a few fun facts. The oceans produce 50% of the Earth's oxygen that we breathe, and that's all done by microbes. They pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as a natural carbon sequestration event. They also are the start of the ocean food chain, which is illustrated nicely on the right-hand side of this slide. But they're also very small and hard to study. Next slide. And so traditionally, when we go out and sample in the ocean, we drop a CTD down, and you can get a profile of what features in the ocean look like. In this particular example, the CTD is measuring chlorophyll, and you can see at about 100 meters, there's a nice peak in chlorophyll. The difference when we actually employ these microbe EDDIE bots is that we can actually put these instruments in the water. They're autonomous underwater vehicles. They can do the same thing the CTD does, do a transect down and find that chlorophyll spike, and then follow that chlorophyll spike for hours or days at a time. So it's really going to change how we sample the ocean. Next slide, please. This is just a still image of that in case the GIF didn't work. There you go. So we have different robots out here. We have a wave glider, we have long-range autonomous underwater vehicles, and we have sea gliders. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the long-range autonomous underwater vehicle, because that one really has sort of the novel technology that both allow us to track these particular features, but also to sample them, which is definitely something completely different than we've ever been able to do before off the CTD, for example. So the last slide. So this is a schematic of the long-range autonomous underwater vehicle, or LRAUV. There is an environmental sample processor that's integrated into the body of it, an extra long yellow piece that you can see in the water. Inside that, that environmental sample processor has a bunch of cartridges, and each one of those cartridges you can see have all these different components. But the novel part about this is that once that the LRAUV can find that chlorophyll spike, which we're interested in, for example, it can actually actively sample seawater while it's in that particular event. And so the seawater comes through these cartridges, it's filtered onto a very small filter paper that collects all the microbes while it's measuring them, and preserves them for investigation later back in the laboratory. So that's all the primer that I wanted to sort of share with you in terms of kind of the engineering part of all of this, just to give you an idea about why we're looking at eddies, why microbes are super important, and some of the new technology that the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute has developed to allow us to sample microbes in their own environment. So with that, I'd like to just pass it over and open it up for questions if we can.
Okay, I'm going to seize on the science and put it back to you guys. You guys in the MATE program, you're given a science problem to try and solve, and that's just what we were given. So Alicia talked a little bit about the science, why we're interested in the open ocean and these eddies. But in particular, there's that area under the water, that chlorophyll maximum layer that we want to sample, and we want to observe it for a long period of time. And the problem was, how do you do that in the open ocean? Because of course, this sample area is not fixed in time. It's just drifting around in the ocean, and we need to find it and then stay with it for a week would be great. That's what our science, their kind of dream is. Can you just sit in there and observe what all the guys are doing? Now, they're tiny microbes. You can't see them. So we have to take them back to the lab to really understand them. So we take a, so our solution that we proposed was to get an unmanned underwater vehicle, no tethers. Ideally, the ship isn't even here the next time we come out, but we're just testing them this time around. So they swim around, they find it, and they sit in it for a long period of time, take samples, and then bring those samples home. And for us, that sounds great, but if they're under the water just drifting, following this, we'd kind of like to know where they are. So we decided we put another robot in there to follow it around and act as a gateway. They can talk to it and let us know where it is and measure things up on the surface. And then we also thought, wow, it would be great if we knew what was going on around the sample. So we threw another robot into the mix that swims around the whole time and samples. That was kind of the solution that we put out. Now we're out during the competition like you guys do at the pool, except our pool is rocking around and we have to kind of deal with that and the weather, and we're doing it all day and all night. This is for 2 weeks, so we're getting kind of tired out here. But so far, things are doing pretty well. We know we want to change a few things, but so far so good.
And then the other part of that, where he was talking about all the vehicle behaviors that allow you to find that feature, there's another part of that, which is that environmental sample processor that's part of that payload. And that's also the part that allows us to bring samples back so that scientists can actually analyze them later. And so in order to do that, right, you capture that water, but you have to find a way to preserve those cells in the state that they were, right? We're not going to recover these instruments for another couple of weeks. So if you could imagine you sampled this and you took them out of their environment and you just left them there, that sample might change, and you can't have that. So inside that instrument, we spent a lot of time also trying to figure out how it is that we preserve it. There's no freezer, so we can't flash freeze. You know, we don't want to pop the cells because we want to try and preserve them. So we use a different kind of a chemical that kind of holds them in suspension so that we can get them back in the state of how they were when they were collected.
Pretty cool. So, hey, I'll ask, I have a question for the students. How many of you competed in the mate competition in 2016? All right, I see a hand or two. So you may remember that we actually featured MBARI's ESP in our scenario. That was one of the scenarios. You had to go down and deploy it so it could take samples. Now, at that point, we were under Europa. We were on Europa, right? Under the icy surface of Europa, but that was our scenario. So this is actually, that ESP is out in the real world in the ocean doing cool things.
By the time you guys are back, you'll be under. That's cool. Really cool.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
I have a question. What inspired you to use ROVs to study ocean eddies? My name.
Go ahead. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Selena, and my question was, what inspired you to use ROVs to study ocean eddies?
Okay, so this is Brett again, and I guess I'll take that on. And the ocean is giant. You know, there's so many places we want to go search, and a big beautiful ship like right here, there's only one of them, and we want to study more places than one. So that's why we've started developing these unmanned robots. They can just go out there and do work on their own. So that was the first thing: make a robot that's smart enough to work on its own, and ideally inexpensive and easy enough to operate that we can put hundreds or eventually thousands of them out there. And that has to be as small as it could be, as inexpensive and as simple. And unfortunately, this first one isn't particularly inexpensive or particularly easy, but we're working on that.
But we got the small part.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It takes two of us to lift it up. It's not that small. It's a lot bigger. It's about 280 pounds, so not that small, but we think it's small compared to our big ROVs.
Thank you.
Add to that, traditionally, when we we have to bring the water up to. And now we're sending the to the ocean to sample from there. So it's a very different strategy in trying to sample where the microbes are instead of bringing the microbes up.
Thank you.
That was a great question.
I have a question. How long have you guys been out at sea?
Here, I think we've been 10 days.
How long have you guys been out at sea?
I think 10 days so far. We've had a lot of different kinds of weather. We've had some very rough weather at the beginning. We had a couple of calm, and now it's not calm anymore, but it's still a ship like this is still comfortable to work. And, so I don't know if you guys have had a chance to be on a ship before, but you'll come to appreciate calm weather as very important to be able to do the kind of work that you guys are thinking of doing. It's easier when it's done.
Yeah, and you think the mate competition day is long, right? Look at 10 days out there.
We were about 1:30 last night, and then back up at 5 this morning. So they're long days, although little windows you can sneak away for a nap if nobody's looking. There's a hammock on top that you have found. My favorite spot.
And besides, the robots are doing also trying to collect. We're scheduled for using casts, and so Roman and I we catch the 6 a.m. cast, the noon cast, and the 6 p.m. cast. They were pretty pretty nice on us this time. We didn't have to do 24-hour CTD operations, so we're pretty stable with that.
I have a question. My name is Jose, and my question is, how do you build the ROVs that you use?
No, we build them just like you guys do. There's parts we have an idea, a design that we like that we think will solve the problem. And we think of how we can build it. We try to use things we could go down to Home Depot or wherever and buy. And some of them we can't, and we figure out how to make those other ways. But it's kind of the same process. The ones we're using here have computers. They're autonomous underwater vehicles and without a tether, but they're really just ROV controlled by a computer without a tether down inside. But it's just like the systems you build.
Thank you.
Well, and I want to jump in real quick on that. From what I understand, this is not the first prototype that you guys have done. This has been a process that you've built upon and upon and upon, and the robot and the structure and the size has changed quite a bit from iteration to iteration. So it's not like you just make something once and you're like, oh, this is done, this is great. There's a lot of learning and change that goes in, correct? Can you sort of talk about that, how it changes as you work through it? And if you guys could actually hold the microphone when you speak, yeah, it's a little sensitive, or just get as close to it as you can. Thanks.
So I've been working on, so the device inside the LR AUV is called an ESP. And I started working on the first ESP in 1996. So I've been working on it for over 21 years now. Wow. And I can tell you that 21 years is barely enough time to really bring them to a point where the idea would be is that they would be this big and basically you toss them off the back of the ship and then they would do the work that's being done right now. So when they say that there are many iterations, I guarantee you there will be many, many iterations and many more to come to make something like this work.
And that's an important distinction between the typical ROV competition, which is a lot of fun and you learn a whole bunch, and the kind of work we're doing. It's as though you had your ROV competition one year, and the next year students started with the ROV that those students had left and worked to improve it. And then at 5 years into it, they looked at the mess that resulted after 5 years of continually trying to fix the previous year's mistakes, and they decided we'll start over. And that repeats over the course of a couple decades. But that's how a system evolves.
Right. And although that seems frustrating, it actually what makes this kind of work really interesting, because every day when I come to work, I have no idea exactly what I will have to tackle. And so it's not a 9-to-5er. It's a job that really engages you, engages all of your skills and all of your imagination to make it happen.
And the other sort of part of that too is that there's all these brand new technologies that are coming online, right? I mean, you guys are all aware there's 3D printing, and you can imagine incorporating that and how you build or design the ROV that you make. And that also fits into what we can do. We can make these parts a lot smaller, because you can imagine fluid paths now that nobody could ever make, and now you can just print them. And so we get to try actually a lot of things. So you guys are really on the cusp of designing some pretty amazing things.
So I think one of the things that you should always remember, no matter what you think you would like to do, or no matter what you're hoping to do, there's probably a way to get to it. Won't necessarily be easy, but it will be there.
Roman, that is really encouraging for these kids, because our competition, the Monterey Regional, is coming up on May 12th at Watsonville High School. And I hope I see all of you raise your hand when it comes to volunteering for competition day, right? Right. I'm recruiting volunteers here. But that's really good, because they're getting into designing and building, and I know they're probably getting frustrated at times and hitting walls and getting some challenges that they didn't anticipate. So it's good to hear, just keep going. It's keep a good attitude, right? And things will change and you'll learn something. And and you'll come up with something that's going to be fantastic, and you'll think about how to improve upon it for next time.
What's the quote that Chris always tells us? If things are going wrong, you must be on the verge of doing something completely right.
Yeah. I like that.
What major did you guys study in college?
We all study different.
So when I started, well, first of all, I was a mechanic for 20 years. And then I decided that time to take a change. And so I went back to school and I went to the University of California at Santa Cruz. Undergraduate degree was in marine biology. And then I continued doing graduate work and got a degree in marine sciences focused on molecular biology.
Wow.
So Brent, and I'm the software engineer on the team. I actually was one of these people who kind of figured out that I liked computers when I was far too young. I was 12 when I started. So I just have an undergraduate degree from the University of California in Santa Cruz, and I've been doing software ever since. Probably ever since '85 professional. So unlike Roman, who's had a much more varied career, mine's kind of just track, but I've enjoyed it.
So I am a marine molecular microbiologist. I got my degree in biology from James Madison University. That's back in Virginia. So I originated from the coast. And then I have a PhD from the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I was actually interested in bacterial symbionts and the relationships between the host and the bacteria. And somehow I have made myself more into oceanography and ended up trying to translate those molecular methods into things that can be used on robots. Kind of I guess sort of a left turn, maybe a little bit.
So I'm the mechanical engineer in our group. Background in just fixing things and building things, combining with a love of the ocean and all things ocean. We're lucky enough to put them all together and we find a job where we do that in support of science. There's lots of other things we can do, and oil for ocean marine robotics, but there's a few jobs available in ocean science, and they're rewarding. Tools and robots that solve important worldwide problems.
Do we have a few more questions?
I have a question. How did you learn how to work with ROVs?
We're still learning.
Well, the ROVs, it was the problem really, is that how do we maintain a presence in a place that's not hospitable to being there, for human beings to be there. And so turns out that robots do a really good job of not having to worry about sleeping and about air and about all of food or any of that stuff. So we learned to take robot technology from outside of marine sciences, and then start adapting it to the problem that we're addressing. And so we're sort of iteratively building these robots to do the work that oceanographers would like to do, but up to now haven't been able to do it. So you basically learn on the job.
Yeah, I think we've really, in terms of how we first learned, I think it's fair to say that the oceanographic community learned about ROVs from the oil and gas folks. They were using them commercially to service oil and gas rigs down below the waterline. They couldn't lift them, and they couldn't get divers down that far. So they needed a robot that would go down there just to bring you the petroleum products on which you depend. So
And the other sort of part of that is, you know, the instrument that's inside. A lot of the things that we use, tools to kinds of organisms are in the water. A lot of these molecular tools, and all of that comes from the medical field. So you can sort of see that we borrow things from different places. So you're not just always looking in the marine environment. If you want to look ahead, you look in different fields to kind of pull in their new technologies, because that really helps move yours along a lot quicker.
And then there's a much more money. Just practically speaking, there's many more people and much more money involved in things like medical analysis and the health system and oil and gas. So you're going to see the real base technologies being pushed by those places, and then we're in this little niche, which is a very interesting, rewarding niche, but it is a small niche. So you're going to pick and choose from these developments that are happening outside.
Yeah. So we probably run into a lot of the same problems that you guys are seeing when you're trying to build these ROVs. I mean, how many times have you put something in the water and it sunk? Or how many times have you put it in the water and it leaked? Do you guys run into that at all?
It's not.
Yeah. They're being shocked.
I have a question. What advice do you guys have for a team entering a role competition?
Could you repeat that?
Or can't see you either. What advice do you guys have for a rope team entering a competition?
Any advice for us? Say louder.
Keep it simple, test early, and test a lot.
Test early, test early.
Yeah.
I have a question. Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Very loud.
Yeah. One of their coaches is Nilo Alvarado, and they're curious if you guys know him because he used to work for MBARI.
Yeah.
You guys know Nilo?
Both of us, both Roman and I.
They know him.
Yeah. And Nilo also was the coach of my kids when they were swimming.
Yeah, Nilo.
Oh, my coach too.
That's good connections. Hey, you know what? I and Roman said he worked on cars. How many of you like to work on cars or have worked on cars before? See, and now he's using those same skills and what he knows to work on underwater robots. So remember that, right? You can apply your skills to different areas.
Laura, get up there.
I have a question. What's your favorite or least favorite part of being on a ship?
Good.
You know it's a robot.
Oh, God. I'd say my favorite part is well, just the outside and being part of a much bigger system, walking on deck and just having the wind blow and enjoy that. And now my least favorite part is the ship gets smaller and smaller as the cruise goes longer and longer. It just seems to shrink. So I guess by the time the 10th day and the 20th day are rolling around, it becomes very small.
So to step in and sort of spell that out for you guys at school, if you can imagine being stuck with all the people that are in your classroom right now, in about 3 different classrooms for weeks and weeks and weeks, that's kind of what it's like at sea sometimes. I mean, you're in a small enclosed area and you're stuck with the people that are there. So when someone asked about advice with the ROV competition, the first thing that came to my mind was have a good team. And quite honestly, that's also the way it is. That's the way it is at sea as well, because you're going to be with these people and working side by side for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's really important to get along with them.
We all get along.
So speaking of the ship, how long is the ship? How big?
Looks like our sound is sort of coming in and out on the ship. Can you guys pull the microphone a little closer? But I can answer the ship is 272 feet.
Wow.
But a lot of that is the room, the places where The engines are running, the galley that has places that you're not really going to go all the time. They're important to the functioning of the ship, but not really the reason.
Got it.
They eat the plants.
And I know earlier when we first started, someone was talking about how much the robot cost, right? How much did the robot cost?
Ship, it looks like you guys have your microphone. There we go, muted. Go ahead.
You're worried about the feedback. The audio was really bad for a while, so we thought that was a solution. So the question about what do the robots cost? I can tell you as the builder of the main AUV that we spend about $125,000 in all the parts, and it takes us 3 months or so to put it together. So if you were to go out and buy one commercially, it would probably cost you about $500,000. So can you think of something you could buy for $500,000 that seems bigger than a little robot?
Several things, yes.
But not many that are as informative as what you guys are doing with it. So there's a trade-off for sure. And I didn't mean to cut off the question about the favorite and least favorite thing on the ship. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit more?
So the thing that I like about my work here is what I'm doing right now. So in spite of the long hours and tight quarters and not getting, it's actually you're out someplace where you see all the way to the horizon. And then of course, because I decided to do marine biology, you realize it goes down another 4 kilometers to the bottom. And so you just really get a chance to experience how big the world is. Because up to that point, before I started doing this, well, the world was, where I lived and where I worked and stuff like that, it was pretty small. You get on a ship and you realize how large it really is. The one thing it's not that I don't like, but the one thing that I realized is on this trip is, I don't know if you guys heard about the thing about plastic in the ocean. Well, I never really understood what that meant until this trip, because we're in this gyre. And I have to say, if you would have come out here and saw what I saw, you would make you sick, because I've never seen so much garbage so far away from the coast ever. And so it was shocking. And so if you ever hear people tell you that, that there's a problem out here, it's real.
Robin, I'm going to chime in here real quick. Thank you for mentioning that. Part of the MATE competition, students can earn extra points for what we call corporate responsibility, right? We came up with corporate responsibility. We use that instead of outreach because the teams, we encourage the teams to transform themselves into companies. So we thought corporate responsibility was a really good term to use. And one of the ways that we encourage them to meet corporate responsibility was to look at real world problems and study them and report back on them, and also to consider in what ways could they help. And we featured plastics in the ocean. It's in our manual this year. So if the students have read the competition manuals, and I'm sure they have, that was probably the first thing they did, right, everybody? They will notice some links and some information about just what you described. So thank you for bringing that up.
Do we have some other questions from the students? We have one from YouTube. If nobody from the class does, I can ask that one. But does anybody from the class want to step up and ask one first?
Yes, I have 2 other questions that my other teammate, but she's not here. Number one is, how does the ROV get water samples from the ocean? And the second one is, how do you get the water samples out of the ROV?
Yeah.
Good question. I think those are for you.
So it turns out that you could imagine that sampler, you wouldn't want to bring whole water back, because that would just make the ROV heavier and heavier and heavier the more samples you tried to collect, right? So the trick that we're doing is that we're actually trying to take the organisms out of the water and stack those. And Alicia mentioned we use something that's called a filter, what looks like a real thin wafer, really tiny, about the size of a quarter maybe. And that filter has a certain, we call it porosity. So things that are larger than that pore, we capture. Because we're going after really small things, we're looking at something that's a 0.22 micron. So really small. So we're capturing bacteria and all these things. And so what we do is the long range AUV goes to that nice big chlorophyll peak. On our instrument, we have valves. We have them we call them bulkhead valves. Those open to the sea, and then we start a pump. And so that pump starts moving seawater across that filter. So above the filter, all those organisms get trapped, and below the filter, we call it sterile seawater, right? We're taking all the particles out. And when we get there at the end, then we preserve that sample so that it's fixed in time. So we preserve what that sample, what it was like when it was collected. But then the exciting part comes is after you try and recover the vehicle, like you guys, whenever you're pulling it out of the tanks, we recover that vehicle, all those samples are inside. Then we start taking apart the vehicle, right? So we can get inside to where the dry bays are that house that particular instrument. And then we open each of those cartridges and we pull out those filters. And then we finally get to open our freezers and we put the samples in them for the scientists to then analyze them later.
And one thing you should remember is, so this vehicle is cruising at 100 meters. So there's quite a bit of pressure on the system. So all of the valves and bulkhead, all of the plumbing and everything has to be able to withstand the pressure, because the inside of the housings is basically at surface atmospheric pressure. So it actually turns out to be quite complex, and has to be really, really reliable to use. So there's, every time you open it up, the chance of flooding the vehicle can happen.
Thank you.
So remember, we're bringing those in, we're collecting things, and we're getting heavier and heavier. Not much heavier, but about 100 grams, I think, by the time we've filled all the samples. And we're out in, Roman said 100 meters of water, but there's 4,000 meters of water below us. And if we start sinking too far, the whole robot will implode and end up being garbage on the seafloor. So we're very careful. And remember your ROVs, you always try to carefully trim them, get the weights just right so it doesn't sink and doesn't float. Well, we always want to be in that same mode. So as we take on extra weight, we have to come up with a way to make ourselves lighter. So that's another system that unfortunately made our vehicle a little more complicated, but it was a requirement. We, again, try to keep it as simple as we can, but we have to solve problems, how to take samples and not get heavy. So there's a system in there to make it a little lighter as we go.
So you can see we're a really diverse group, and each of us kind of has a different focus. Like, I'm really focused on the samples. Brett's focused on the vehicle and trying to keep it from sinking. Roman's focused on the samples and creating this robot. Brent is the software guy, and we all have to work together, and we all come with really big strengths, and we all utilize each other's ideas to try and actually build something that will work over and over again, because that's really the key. It can't just work once, right? It's got to work over and over again to make it worthwhile for science to work.
Well, that's a great segue actually to the question that we have on YouTube, which was, you've mentioned that failure can be educational. What would be the most instructive or possibly amusing robotics failure that your team has encountered so far?
Amusing? Too
Yeah,
early
maybe.
for anything amusing, but
Yeah,
let's see. Anything?
Well,
So you had an LRUV that got a shark attack, right?
Ooh.
We're out in the ocean, and you're in the there's predators out there. So unfortunately, the AUV swimming by itself is about the same size as a seal swimming around. So you've got to watch out. There's things that eat seals, and great white sharks in particular. So we've had them attack us and shake us around and try to sink us. But
there was a few teeth. We actually collected the AUV, and it had a few shark's teeth in the hull. Embedded.
Helped that we knew what kind of shark it was, because he left some teeth, or she. We don't really know. So yeah, that's
That's a hazard.
They've been, of course, captured by fishermen, and they'll come up in their nets and bring them on. They'll bring them on board, and sometimes they don't want to give them back.
Well, there won't be any sharks in the Watsonville High School swimming pool ROV team, so you don't have to worry about that. Not that I know of, anyway.
That won't be an extra last-minute obstacle that you throw in just to make things a little more complicated.
We talked about doing a really surprise mission, so maybe.
Well, I think we have time for one more question from the students. Anybody have anything for us? And it looks like, Mr. Xavier, you're muted right now. So if you guys have a question, you're going to have to turn your mic on.
No.
All right.
No, all right.
No last questions from us.
Okay. Mr. Trisha, anything from you?
Have you guys worked with other teams to build an ROV together?
We've so our instrument, the environmental sample processor, we've actually teamed up with different universities that might have different ways to analyze the samples, and so we've worked with them in that way. We're on this cruise right now, and the vehicles were developed mostly at MBARI, but we're actually transferring these vehicles to members at the University of Hawaii, the SCOPE team, who are going to start deploying them as part of their science goals and missions. So we've kind of done both, where we've worked with people to actually develop new features to our instruments, and then we've also transferred that technology to people who have never even thought about using, or just are thinking about using, that kind of technology.
Cool. And we come from the same educational family, I think. I was a student of Chuck Fisher's at Penn State back in the day, and I know James Childress, I don't know if he's still at UC Santa Barbara or retired, but back in the day, I did similar work.
Gauchos. UCSB.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I think we're, go ahead. Yeah.
Wrap up on this end. I'm part of the team at the University of Hawaii that they're handing off some of the instruments over to, but we wanted to make sure to have the experts in the room for this call, and maybe next time we're out here, it'll be the University of Hawaii members that can talk all about how these instruments are working and what they're doing for science.
Cool.
Thanks from the Falkor.
Thank you very much. I just want to, close by saying thank you all very much for joining us today. And of course, the team for taking the time to share knowledge and insight. Be sure to visit schmidtocean.org to find out more about the scientific expeditions and follow along with the research there as well. We're on social media, so go there for updates. We are at Schmidt Ocean on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have any questions that you think of after this, please email us again at schmidtocean.org, or go to social and tag it hashtag microbe Eddie bots. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you guys around on the next time. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.